Hey, so like in the lot, kind of a segue, but something I'm curious about. You always hear the hype guys, yeah, yeah, or shouting out their friend's name. Has there ever been like a heckler? Like, have you ever seen Happy Gilmore, like the heckler that's in the crowd, the guy that goes, "Happy, you suck,
jackass."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Has there ever been like that in the lot?
For me, or like
Can you
watching?
remember any time? There probably was like in the you know what?
There's definitely been. I will say that, especially my last year.
Hard vibes thrown. Yeah.
Well, because I marched an era of Blue Devils where it was the beginning of, oh yeah, like we should hate the Blue Devils, because we were undefeated the year before, and people celebrated us the year before because it had been a while for the percussion session at least. But that next year, we got booed everywhere, and there was definitely like I don't want to say people being audibly difficult in the lot, but there were definitely some tough crowds, if that makes sense,
Dude, I think that there are tough crowds. I don't remember any like hecklers, and I don't even recently now watching lots. I don't feel like there are any hecklers. If anything, I feel like there's people
Like you just go see the groups that you want to see.
Dude,
there's people overhyping dirt. Unfortunately,
The overhype kind of gets to me sometimes. It's like, why are we cheering? That roll was terrible. What are you doing here?
Yeah.
But I do like to give it up for the members and stuff. I don't remember any tough lots. I think I was always just so dialed in as a member that I didn't even really care what people were doing. I'm just here
I could
to
say
do
the
my
same
job.
for me. Yeah, same for me. I tried my best to tune cheering or any of that other stuff. I never noticed or experienced any heckling like that when I was marching. And I know there's like, I've known people that have been aggressively goofy in lots of people they know that are marching or teaching the groups. Like they'll like be yelling all kinds of people's names and trying to get them to break and laugh and stuff. Like that's like a different type of heckling, I guess, because you're trying to mess them up. But no, I always tried to block out as much of that as humanly possible when I was marching and just do my job pretty much.
Now, you know what? Now that I think about that, now that George said about the 90s, yeah, back then, like members from other corps were pretty harsh on each other. Like if they'd go to the lot and watch a line, they just sit there and
Oh well, that was
the hard
something.
looks and yeah.
How about vibing each other in the lot?
Yeah.
Did you guys ever experience that?
I think that was probably done by the time you guys marched.
Yeah, I think now it's more supportive. Like people are just like going and cheering. They're like in the uniform. Like you see like the BD or the Blue Coats guys like flocking to like the Crown or the SCV warm up. Like let's go check it out. Like these guys are beating us. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah, that's definitely way different than what like the BD and the SCV guys were not like. It was like
I think indoor has a part of that too, because like a lot of these dudes will march the same indoor group, but then go to different corps or vice versa. And it's like, oh, that's my bro. Like he's holding it down. Like, so they're kind of give it up in that regard. If I don't know if drum corps was more regional as far as like who you audition for, but now I feel like with these satellite camps that they hold, like a lot of these corps are just a mix match hodgepodge of like Midwest, East Coast, West Coast, Texas. Like it's all over the place.
Yeah. Sorry to segue on that, but yeah, I'm just kind of curious.
No,
that's good.
To add to that, I don't think there's any like mean mugging that goes on, but we're still competitive. Everybody in that activity is still going to be competitive with each other. And I've never seen it or heard about it, like groups like trying to stare each other down or anything like that, like intimidate them in the lot or whatever. But when you turn around and walk away, there's probably some smack talking about how are we losing to them?
For sure.
You hear that? That definitely goes on behind closed doors on the bus rides at night. When you leave shows, you look at the recap and go, there's no way.
Yeah.
I heard them in the lot or after. There's no way they beat us in drums or what. That goes on all the time.
So
but it's never like trying to start a fight in the lot or like intimidate anybody or anything like that.
Right. I feel like now I just text Mike if I saw him on tour at Blue Coast, be like, dude, I was in the lot today. Guys sounded like trash.
Yeah. I mean, there was, I'll bring this up about the competitiveness, but Atlanta Regional 2010, I was on tour with Blue Stars. Evan was doing his second year. See, look at him shaking his head. He knows exactly where I'm going, and he already remembers. Somehow, so 2010 Blue Stars, we had our moments. The snare line was decent by the end of the summer. My first summer, really green, learned a lot. We were not as good as Crown's drumline in 2010. The front was not as good as their front. The drumline was not as good as their drumline. I knew it, and I was in Blue Stars. But we beat them. Was it Christensen that was the judge in Atlanta?
Dude, I'm looking it up. Just keep going.
So we beat them in drums at the Atlanta Regional. And of course, we had like a party on the bus afterwards, and like we're freaking out, having a good time, listening to music and everything. And he's texting me and he goes, "There's no freaking way. There's no, I'm sorry." I was like, "Dude, I know we're not as good as you guys, but whatever." You guys, and then we went out the next show, they kicked the crap out of us by like, it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
Dude, your squads couldn't even play triplet rolls.
Yeah, George could probably tell a story like that from '92. I remember you telling me.
Which one?
When VK beat the Blue
Oh,
Devils.
Yeah, we all have our moments. I remember when Float went to VK, and he had been like, his last year at Blue Devils was 90. His first year at VK was 92.
92. Yeah, that's when I started VK.
And so Blue Devils was in a rebuilding period, and that's when I went up there, and there were some, we saw each other a lot, like first tour, and there was a show where they beat us in drums. And I remember Pete Sapadin, who was on staff at VK, came over to us, Blue Devil alumni, and I was this little punk rookie in the snare line at Blue Devils, and I was like, "Hey Pete, tell them that's never happening again." Just full of it, just full of like all of the, oh. So let me ask you guys this: talking about how caught up we get up in this stuff when we're doing it. Now that you guys have been aged out for a decade, and you are on
don't remind me.
Exactly.
Don't remind me.
And you are on the other side of that wall, right? How do you look back on the things that you were really caught up in, as far as like what was really important to you, what you really valued, but now with the benefit of history, with the benefit of time, and thinking about, what do I still care about 10 years later?
I think the things that I still care about 10 years later is just wanting every core to like get their fair shake at it. After hearing and being able to talk to people who judge or people who have judged or go back and watch shows, I never felt like I was slighted. Well, at the time, I for sure felt like I was slighted out of a drum trophy in 2009. And then, but going back on it, like, I feel like that was just like, I respect what BD did in 09 more now than I did then. But I do understand that there are like some kind of like politics in the game, unfortunately. And so every group and every core has got a vie for their kids. They're going to go out there and they're going to throw punches for their kids. And some groups have a little more oomph behind that punch than others. But I think 10 years later, I just still want like transparency, like just be as transparent as you can. Like, I wish they still put the judges tapes on the DVDs like they used to back in the day.
I want to hear the tapes.
I have like a black market of judges tapes in a Dropbox. But it's just interesting to hear what people get credit for on one end versus like discounted for on the other end, and vice versa. So
I don't know if you guys had heard this or not, but I think I want to say I brought it up during our interview with Scott, and I brought it up during the interview with Thurston. But since you guys are bringing it up, the current state of judging, right? Something that I had brought up to both of them, and this was because I had been watching a lot of other quote unquote judged athletic arts activities, like in the Olympics and stuff, which is this whole notion of understanding if you do everything perfectly within the program that you're putting out there, what's the max score you can get? What is the highest level that you can achieve with regards to like placements, right? Because then I feel like it's something that is very much unsaid right now, which is that only a handful of groups have a chance at winning overall. Only a handful of groups have a chance of winning percussion, but that's never implicitly said. Who's in, who's out. Everybody goes out, plays the same level of clean, but because of what you're doing, right? This is as high as the score is going to go for you, because if you knew that early on, that would cause you to adjust certain things in a different way during the season,
For sure.
And I don't know if there's necessarily a chance to get there, because immediately I think your mind goes to, well, everybody's doing stuff that is so different from each other. But your potential is still being evaluated, right? And compared one group to the next group. So I guess kind of like a general question is the current judging system, good, adequate? What are some things that could be better about it?
Are the right things being rewarded?
Are the right things being rewarded? That's obviously like a hot topic too. What do you guys think?
I'll start.
A question right there.
I'll start my statement by saying this: I do not envy judges at all.
No,
because no matter what you do, you're gonna get bitched at by somebody.
And also, also, the time. I remember this was actually brought. This was brought up. Maybe it was during an SCPA thing or a WGI. I think it was during an SCPA thing because they were talking about the amount of time the judges get. Right. And they've even adjusted that. They've even done things where it's like after a certain number of groups, judges can go back and adjust their scores just for the sake of I
think it's like 4 groups or something like that.
Right. So, but it's always no reads, no previous reads, no looking at it before. It has to be literally in the moment. You have to be reacting to everything in the moment. Is even that part of it right?
Which I don't even understand the previous reads part. That doesn't make sense that you wouldn't want a judge to have a previous read. Because even when you go into critique, they give notes of well, we want you to catch this part of the show. I feel like the better the judge knows about the show, the better the read he's going to give the group. Well, I know that the percussion is going to be at the front at this moment, so I got to position myself to read it. I don't understand if that's still a thing. I personally don't understand why you wouldn't want somebody to have a read. To think that a judge doesn't have access to YouTube in these days is just ridiculous anyway. But to kind of double back, so I don't envy the judging. I do find it interesting when a judge is you guys aren't doing enough, you guys aren't doing enough, you guys aren't doing enough for group A versus group B is just man, I really appreciate the space and the tacit time there. It's where's the where's the line there versus reward of content versus achievement? I wish that every group could listen to every other group's judges tapes. When you are for the Olympics, for example, you see what every judge gives that person that goes on before you, and then you see what every judge gives that. I mean, there's not really a look into why they gave that, but I do think that transparency is pretty awesome. I would say if you say judging is adequate, you're wrong. Not that because it's bad, but that would be complacent. And I think that the judges should ever be just all right, how can we get better? How can we get better? How can we give these groups better reads? How can we do more for the product on the field? And I think that talking with some judges, they do have those conversations, and obviously they've made rule changes to the percussion judge specifically on having just the percussion judge limit on how far you can go back, which has changed the arranging game for sure. But I hope that they're continuously just reaching into their mind of well, I gave this group credit for this and I took away for this group for doing this, so I got to make that unilateral or across the board. That's got to be my stance. But I don't know if that always happens.
I think Evan's definitely got more of, I know Evan's thought more about this than I have just in text groups we're in and hearing, talking with other friends of ours and everything. But you mentioned the if group A and B both play at the same level of clarity, how do you assess, is this, how high of a ceiling can you give that group in clarity? I would hope that the way it's set up, and I don't know what judge training's like. I don't know how they describe achievement versus comp in the music category, for example. We'll just use that as an example here, that I would hope that it would be set up in a way to where you have group A playing much easier stuff than group B, but group A is literally 99 out of 100 in clarity. Everything they're doing is perfectly together, blended, balanced, but it's super easy. They would get a 99 in achievement and a 47 in comp. And then you'd have group B, okay, you're pulling off a 90 in achievement, but your comp is a 97. They would beat the pants off of Group A, but the Group A still achieved that 99 in achievements. I would hope that would be how it would be. Do you guys know? Just from
I
my
love when I
knowledge?
see the boxes split.
Yes,
Like
right.
I
if
love
it's
it
just
too,
1 1
which is
2
what-
2 3 3, I'm
And
like,
and
that's
it's
nowhere
basically
that's right.
like, and this is an ignorant point of view because it's definitely from the outside of it. But I have asked some of my friends who are judges, like, so how do you reconcile this? And basically, what it looks like from the outside is that the numbers are just being paced from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Like, so around mid-July, they should be around here. Beginning
Like
of
there's
August,
a cap.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
and it's
like-
just and both numbers seem to kind of go up at this pace versus like what you're saying, where it's like, I understand that shows change over the course of a season, but what doesn't make sense is that a show changes as much as the clarity gets better. Yet you see the numbers go up at the same pace.
Like I want to see the first show happen and the recap comes out of the first regional, and I want to see a group. So we'll just use Crown for an example, or Blue Coats or whatever. Content 93, like first show of the season.
Right.
Achievement 57.
Right.
And like you're gonna change licks, you're gonna update phrases, you're gonna change parts of the show musically, as the season goes on. So that comp score might change some, but I mean, if you think of it in a very ones and zeros way, like I presented it, like your comp score should be like a judge on the first read in June would be like, all right, cool, you all wrote like a 95. But you're
Use
playing
that
it about
buzzword.
And maybe if you water your show, right, that comp score goes down a little bit, but the achievement goes up.
But exactly, and
Right.
then you find
But that's just
where
like
your
that's
balance
just like a figure
is.
skater doing a triple jump instead of a quadruple jump.
Right,
Yep.
right. Dude, that's a buzzword trigger when that judge is on a tape saying like the words clarity of intent or what. It's like, oh, your clarity of intent. And you're like, ah.
It's
But
like, I see what you're trying to do there, but you're not doing it yet.
and I do understand how if you get cleaner as an ensemble, that would make your show more effective.
Which is
because
something
what you're
that-
doing comes across.
Which is something that they say. Which is
something that they say. Honestly,
Right.
it really feels more like there's one music caption. If you're talking about WGI, for example, there's one music caption and there's three design captions. The music PA is the music, and then music effect, visual effect, and visual all feel way more like design boxes to me.
Yeah, and we talked about this in the chat. I was at one of the, and like it's funny because we talk about they would say, the organizations would say that every year after the season we meet up to make sure that the judging is what it should be, right? They have these meetings. But I was there in the meetings after the 2016 season where they talked about exactly what you said, which is you have this music achievement score, and it was being weighted a certain way. There's a certain like multiplier or certain, like that number, how it's factored into the total score.
Well, music effect and music are 60 points, and visual
Right.
effect and visual are 40
So there was a
points.
proposal on the table to, and I apologize to anybody if I'm misrepresenting this, but there was a proposal on the table to take away some of that weight that the music achievement score was giving, because, and the argument was that clean implicitly impacts design, all those other captions. When a group comes out and they're just performing at a super high level, you cannot help but have that bleed over into the effect captions, into the more design captions. And so they were saying that that it was having such an impact implicitly that they didn't want it to have like this practical impact. They want to take away a little bit of the impact and the weight of it on the sheets. But in the discussion, in which something we talked about, they can debate these things in those meetings literally for hours on end. It boiled down to this discussion of, what are we rewarding? Are we rewarding design, or are we rewarding the kids? And and everybody in the room, the majority of them were designers, but also a lot of them were educators. So obviously they're impacting like both of those things. But that I think that is not necessarily a resolved discussion these days. You know.
No, I
Well,
don't think so.
Let me jump in real quick before I lose this train of thought. In that same vein, I think this indoor season that just wrapped up, and Evan and I touched on this in our recent episode of our recap of finals, would kind of say that clarity is more important a little bit. Because, you know, I mean, my final conclusion after the season, if you look at Independent World, X and Broken City, to me and Evan, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm pretty sure you said the same thing. X and Broken City had better shows than Pulse did. Mm-hmm. From a design standpoint and effectiveness standpoint, how they impacted the crowd visually and musically. Like, and the recap kind of agrees with that. If you look at it closely and kind of pick it apart, that, I mean, the activity kind of said, all right, Pulse, you were just too clean. You had to win. Like, you played your butt off.
Right.
But I would argue that X and Broken City, I think, had better shows. So I would use that. Now, that's my opinion, but I think there's a little bit of evidence of that in the sheets, recap sheets, but I think you could use that to argue that they do reward clarity, whether they intend to or not, over design choices.
I agree with that in the outcome this year, but I don't think that clarity is implicit in all the other captions. If somebody would suggest that, I'd be like, well, I don't know about that, because I see some kids miss some dots and some diddles miss some clarity there, but Group X is still right up there because what they're being asked to do is really hard. So I wouldn't say that, and they're getting rewarded for that, which is fine, I guess, but I wouldn't say that it's implicit in all the captions. So I like the way it's set up.
And I don't want to say this year's example is like, this means it's this way for all of band. Like, it just I was just kind of like, let's relate this to the season that just ended a little bit, kind of opportunity, and kind of get that out there. But yeah.
Do you guys ever, I was going to say, do you guys ever find yourselves looking at shows like with battery only glasses on and you don't take the pit? Yeah, I'm guilty of that too. But I just want to say something.
Or even just snare line only glasses.
Snare line, yeah.
Yes.
But
I'm worse about it than Evan. I'm way worse about it than Evan is.
I have kind of trained myself over the years to not do that as much. Sure. I still fall into that category. Probably, I would say it's weighted 60-40. But I have made a conscious effort, like before a show goes on, I'm like, all right, where's the pit? Where are they set up? What they got? How many like this? How many to make it, because if I'm going to get on there and be like, oh, this show was better, this guy's played cleaner, it's like, in what section?
Yeah, and you totally discount the whole front ensemble, what they're doing. I'm guilty of that too, you know. And
this podcast is actually, I was the biggest, like, I'm a snare drummer. I want to watch the snare lines and assess the snare lines, like my whole marching career, soon after it was over and everything. And it's one of those, this has made me open my ears up a lot more and my eyeballs
doing the podcast
shows. And I'm
doing the
podcast, like doing this stuff. And, you know, when Evan and I'll do reaction videos, he'll in the moment react to something and my brain goes, oh, I didn't even notice that at all.
Right.
And so it's good doing that in real time with him, because it makes me like, there's times in those reaction videos I will rewind, and it's kind of because I want the audience to get to hear it, but I want to hear what he just pointed out, because I totally I was zoned in on element X and totally missed what was going on over there.
And no offense to like the battery kids who post these videos of like the snare cam or the quad cam, the GoPro looking down at the drum, but those do not interest me at all. But like the other day, I watched one that I'm gonna take
my videos down. Then, you know, just the ones.
No. It's not like that.
Yours bounce around though.
Yeah. Yours bounce around. Well, and you have the GoPros and stuff like on the side. It's kind of, but like the ones that they wear on the head looking down. But I watched somebody from RCC posted their like Xylo head cam, and I just watched the whole thing because I was mesmerized. I was like sitting there thinking, how the hell do you do this?
Yeah, that's because
I just never did that. And there's like, I've written battery books for high schools and stuff, but the whole front ensemble arranging game is wild to me because there's so many textures, there's so many instruments, you have so many implements. First of all, you have the keyboards, you have the rhythmic overlay of all the keyboards, you have these timbre changes you can do, you have all the auxiliary percussion, these crotales, like these cymbals, like all these choices you can make. And I'm just like, dude, this is blowing my freaking mind right now. So watching those sort of things, or like the Vanguard marimba cam, has kind of forced me to be like, I need to pay more attention to this.
Honestly, I think eye-opening moment for me was like probably, and you know, probably the 2019 Blue Devils front ensemble, because you sit there and you wonder how do they score like perfect on finals night and stuff. But then we're looking at it. We're looking at it through like the battery glasses rather than the whole, the whole thing. Because their front ensemble was smoking that year. So
Right.
And I'll point out for Blue Devils, there's a lot of years that you hear people say like, how they win drums, how they do this. It's like, well, look at the whole package. Blue Devils front ensemble is phenomenal, probably almost every year.
Yeah.
Kind of like them and the Cavaliers, Vanguard's pit, wherever Rennick is at, their front is always phenomenal every summer too. It's like, even if you got those like you said, battery goggles on, yeah, maybe their battery wasn't the best, but their pit was so good that the differential between their battery and maybe the other two groups that might have had a better drum line, the pit being so much better than them still puts Blue Devils, the whole percussion package, ahead on the sheets, and they win to Sanford. And in my opinion, you deserve it in that regard because it is a percussion section. Like it's not best drumline award.
How far away are we from an app that can judge based on AI? Like just hold it up. I actually when we were in Dayton, I had this really funny idea for an app that gives comments, like the tech app. So you put it up in front of the line, and what does the app have to say? And you train it on like a certain.
I mean, you could with machine learning.
That's what.
I'm
this
a
is
data
what I'm
scientist.
saying.
Yeah, I'm a data scientist
Never
by trade,
happened.
and that would be some pretty. I see pattern recognition. I mean,
You'd basically have to have somebody write a method of like what skill sets get rewarded at what value versus how clean they are.
and you could.
Oh, they
you could
played
train
threes
you
versus
could
fours
train it
versus
to
slam
listen
drag.
for the distance between notes based on the mathematical breakdown of rhythms and whatever. But it would have to know
All right, nerds.
the meter. And all right, let's not go down this rabbit hole. That's
man.
So
yeah, the app's going to be called Skynet, and it's going to be created by
Yeah, there you
Cyberdyne
go.
Systems. And next
There
thing
it
you know,
is.
that's going to become self-aware, and the Roombas that are in your house are going to knock you over and start playing
Yeah.
flam drags.
How did humanity fall?
Yeah.
Well, they designed a drumline tech app, and it got out of control.